I would like to define what the motion means and do some setup. Then I would like to move on to our first two arguments, which are about responsibility and efficiency. So the characterization. So what is this debate about? This debate is about who should work harder to stop climate change. Rich countries like America, Germany, Japan, or poor countries like Bangladesh, Kenya, Nepal. We say rich countries should do more work. So what does more mean? Well, it means that in this case, rich countries should spend more money, around 80%, and should adapt faster so they can stop this pollution. And rich countries should also give help to the poor countries in forms of technology and money, while poor countries should spend less money, around the 20%, and have more time to adapt so they can keep up. So who does this affect? So this affects the children in Bangladesh drowning in floods, kids in Kenya starving from droughts, island families watching their homes sink, and all of us who live on planet Earth and call it home. So why should rich countries do more? Well, they broke it. They destroyed it by starting the industrial age and polluting it. And they can also afford to fix it. They have trillions of dollars. Also, China, we are not considering it a poor country because the info slide said a country that has a lot of money and technology is a rich country, and China is there. And on to my first argument about responsibility. Rich countries have a moral and historical responsibility to act more decisively. Developed nations were in the first industrialized, burning coal to power themselves and grow rich. They also went and colonized other countries, abused them, mined their resources, and then later left them in a mess. And now these countries, the poor countries, are still recovering from the problem today. So when rich countries tell these nations to stop developing so they can fight climate change, it's deeply unjust. They say we grew rich by destroying the planet, but you must stay poor to save it. So what developing countries are very unjust. But what does this even matter, you may ask? It's because rich countries can do more. They can reduce emissions by historically costs while allowing poor countries to grow themselves economically stable while not polluting and destroying the whole planet. On to my second argument about efficiency. Our second argument is beyond morality. It simply makes the most sense for rich countries to do more. Fighting climate change requires massive financial resources and strong institutions, things that rich countries already have, unlike poor countries. They have renewable energy, electric transport systems, but poor countries can't do any of these. And they can't afford these without sacrificing essential services. Poor countries may have to devote money from healthcare or education to fund solar farms, and it hurts its people to do that. But if a rich country does it, it barely dents it. And see, rich countries also have technological capacity. Sure.
So my question is that how do you make sure the rich countries will actually agree this policy? Because according to you, there is nothing that attract the rich countries. They won't get any benefits from helping the poor countries. So why not just developing themselves and make sure their territory is rather safer than the poor countries? How would they agree to help the poor countries but not just work by themselves? Thank you.
Out of order. Indeed, beyond innovation, these countries have power. They can stop institutions by developing laws and passing them out, and other companies would have to follow because they still want to trade with them. So, in our world, it's fair, justice, and effective, while opposition world is probably slow, unjust, and unequal. That is why I'm proud to propose.
Our definition to the rich countries do more is that the rich countries invest financial support to employment to plans on the green development, provide technology and the green energy for poor countries. First, contention one, the poor countries is actually polluting more. Poor countries have lower per capita GDP, so their government personalized fiscal funds for addressing the food security, basic education, and primary healthcare. Invest in the environmental protection is regarded as non-essential as per. Just no need for the environment protection before. For example, a certain African country expects for the criminal enterprise for the environmental taxes and allow them to discourage wastewater directly to erect further investment. Because if it's refused, the enterprises will move to the other countries with lower threshold. Extent issue. High pollution industry has become a must-have for employment for the poor countries. The factories in India, small-scale smelters, as examples, although they cause surface pollution, they absorb a huge amount of low-skilled laborers. As a result, the government dare not easily to introduce strict as environmental policy. So the judge, actually, the poor country are polluting more, and they have the more responsibility to take action to finish this climate change. And now moving on to our second contention. The rich country and poor countries needs to help each other. The need of research complementary between the rich and the poor countries and environmental governments essentially stems for their significant difference in the resource endowment and development stages. A single country cannot cover the full chain's need of addressing the environmental issues, and only through complementary can be efficient. And incredible global environmental governments have achieved. Resources that the rich countries can provide. Financial support, possessing the significant physical strength, they can offer financial assistance for the environmental protection project in small countries, such as renewable energy development and money. And also, the big countries can give the poor countries technology and experience. Mastering the low carbon technologies, pollution control technologies, and the environment management systems. They can help the poor countries avoid the data of the pollute first and treat later. And rules of the standards. With the long-term participation in the global environmental governance, they have the assumes the experience in policy formation and the international cooperation, involving them to take the lead in the building cooperation framework. And the resources that the poor country can offer, like natural resources retreats, many poor countries are endowed with the abundance. I say no, sorry. Resources such as forest, wetland, and biodiversity, serving as key carriers of the global carbon sinks and the ecological balance. In the local sense in the labor force, the small countries can give the labor to these big countries, and they can work together. And for example, South Africa Just Energy Transition Partnership aims to help the South Africa gradually phase out of coal. The South Africa have been help each other with the United States, United Kingdom, France, Germany, and European Union that committed to the providing funds. And that is why the rich country have technology and the poor country has like labors or natural resources, and the poor country has pollute more, so they need to help each other to fix this climate change in a better way and a quicker way. Proud to propose.
Judge, do you really think that poor countries should actually do as much as the rich countries do? We think that more rich countries should do more to fight climate change for three big reasons. And first two has been claimed by our Prime Minister. As I would like to give our team's third argument, but before that, I would like to have some rebuttals. First of all, they said that everyone should equally work hard because this is a global commitment or whatnot. This is wrong because that sounds fair but ignores reality. Equality between unequal parties is just injustice. Poor countries don't have the money. Forcing equal effort means starving their people and causing major harms to their own people. Rich countries have caused 80% of pollution and they still have the resources to fix it. So if one person breaks 8 toys and the other breaks 2, you don't both clean up 4 toys. The one who caused more mess and the mess fixes more. Moving on to the second rebuttal. Again, they said that poor countries need independence. Why is this not true? You can't be independent if you're dead. So poor countries are drowning and starving now. Survival comes before helping solve this. Moving on to a third rebuttal. They talked about how they talked about how poor countries must act now for survival. But that's exactly what makes this unfair. Poor countries are fighting for survival, and that's the problem. They're so busy trying to survive floods and droughts that they can't also fight climate change equally. Bangladesh is like evacuating drowning villages, and Kenya is starting children, right? They don't have time or money to do the equal climate work and save these people together. Yes, I'll
POI.
take your POI now. I'll take the first POI.
Just like how can the poor countries why can the poor countries doesn't help the rich countries by giving them labor, giving them people?
So opposition said that like these people can be used, but then these people are about to die if they don't if the government doesn't help them bring like food to the table, give them healthcare or whatnot. What's the more important, people's lives or rich countries saving more money? I'll not take that. Moving on to our extension argument. Argument 3. Which is about vulnerability and survival. Even if poor countries wanted to act equally, they can't. And forcing them to causes like disaster. What's the mechanism here? First, rich countries cutting emissions and funding adaptations protects lives immediately, such as like flood walls, drought-resistant crops, and disaster relief. If poor countries divert money from food or education to make climate costs, millions died today. And what's the impact of this? Drowning children in Bangladesh, starving children in Kenya are not just like hypotheticals that might happen in the future. Every dollar poor countries spend on climate tech is just one less dollar for survival of their people. That's out of time. Rich countries, 3% discomfort saves millions of lives, and that's why we think that they should be the ones acting more. Not only that, what are rich countries using these environment changing material for? They're using it for luxury, such as like fast shopping, which is like where they just buy clothes and then because the trend is over, they throw away and buy new ones. They like get massive homes. They get like private jets, like vehicles. And why do they do this? They do it for the luxury and for their like liking. But what do these poor countries do? These poor countries are doing these like coal fuel like burns. Why do they do it? They're doing it because they need survival. They're doing it because it's their only way to survive. And that's why we can't just morally compare these two nations and say that they're all using the climate whatever CO2 and make them carry on the same burden as the developed nations do. To weigh this opposition world, there's like symbolic equality and mass starvation. But in our world, there's actual fairness and survival for the vulnerable and actually progress on emissions. And because of that, I'm more than proud to propose.
As a concise second speaker, we strongly believe that rich countries should not do more in climate change than poor countries. As the first speaker of our side has already mentioned, doing in climate change is a shared responsibility. Also, he emphasized that doing a lot in climate change can cause too much, destroying a whole country's economy, even for richer countries. To expand our arguments, I am going to mention another strong argument for our side. To elaborate with my teammates, I am now going to add another strong point. As we all know, being a developed country, they all have the same process of developing in different stages. This means that doing those developing processes is just a matter of time, meaning that no matter what, rich and poor countries both have the same amount of pollution, giving both same responsibilities. Even though it seems like that rich countries are more likely to create pollution, but it is just the time and way of how it is polluted. To make it clear, one example of rich country is Germany, which is a very representative country of all developed countries. Even though ages ago there were lots of factories and manufacturing, but it is now a successful country with great economy. This means that this is because that when the country earns enough money, they become rich and they started only importing things and protecting their own natural resources like fossil fuel this means that because there must be a place to import things, poor countries are the ones that manufacture most things in the world, turning into the biggest problem for climate change. Plus, already mentioned, helping with climate change is a global responsibility. This is a stronger and better point than my opponent. So now I'm going to move on to my to my rebuttals. Firstly, my opponent are saying that richer countries are creating more pollution, letting them take higher responsibilities, doing more on climate change. However, that is untrue. A rich country and a developed country that they have been developed long ago, meaning that they have they are having less manufacturing now. Nope. Oppositely, poor countries are the ones that need manufacturing to earn money, supporting their economy. This means that my opponent arguments are the exact opposite of the fact, and what we need to bring advantage to the world, which is the main disagreement in this debate. All right. Secondly, my opponent mentioned that rich countries can do it because they have a lot of money. But however, even though they have money, it doesn't mean that it can't be. The rich countries must do more because that Okay.
If poor countries should do equal work, where exactly will they get money for solar panels when they can't even feed their own people?
We did not say that they get it from money, but what we really want is them to for example, the rich countries can give them money and help them to build those things like those solar panels, but those poor countries can contribute it by letting people do labor for it, and everybody can take action, which can make a better effect. And this is meaning that my opponent's point is untrue, and based on that, I have proven all my opponent's point as nonsense and does not stand. This is a clearly con-win.
Hello, I'm the government whip of this debate. Under the motion, this House believes that rich countries should do more to fight climate change than poor countries. Now rebutting with some points that the opposition has said. Opposition says that poor countries also pollute, so they should have kind of like a shared equal responsibility for the climate change, as the poor countries also have done things like making factories to make different things that the rich countries want. However, their logic counts where pollution happens, but ours counts who owns the pollution sources. Most pollution in poor countries come from the rich countries' corporations. For example, like Apple investing in the poor parts of China with Foxconn, or Nike in Bangladesh and Vietnam, or Shell trying to mine and get a lot of these oil from different countries in different poor countries. Now, the impact. Now, when responsibility is based on ownership, rich countries are accountable for about 70 to 80% of emissions. Solving that first is far more effective than spreading efforts equally and integration. Their world wastes poor countries limited resources and on small contributions, and our world targets the real 80% problem, saves lives, and solves the big problem of climate change. Now, moving on to my clashes. My first clash is about equity versus equality. Now, rich countries have a better chance of fighting for the world and succeeding than the poor countries, as the poor countries might not be able to afford the things that the rich countries do for the world, or the opposite, and moving on to the weighing of this clash, when countries value equality over equity, it really isn't being equal. The big countries with more money should be contributing their own fair share for the global interest of the world, which is shown by our principle. The big same goes for the poor countries. The people there should be spending less than the global superpowers just because they are poorer than them, and should be being guided by these big countries and these big corporations. As a result, there should be a split in the amount of money that global superpowers put into the climate change equation, because they have more money and other resources to make a larger impact in the world. And smaller nations should be focusing on the development and raising quality of life for their own people. Now, more on that on the second clash, about capacity. Now, rich countries clearly have a greater capacity because they have stronger economies, advanced technology, and stable systems to handle large-scale climate projects that poor countries will not be able to do. Poor countries are still struggling to provide basic needs like food and healthcare. So expecting equal effort is unrealistic and actually harmful for the poor countries. Climate change requires massive funding and innovation that only rich countries can provide and do effectively. Therefore, those with the most capacity should do more and should be trying to do more, making the proposition's model fair and much more effective than the opposition's model. Now, the weighing of this clash is that opposition's world sounds fair on paper, but actually just collapses in practice because poor countries can't sustain equal effort without harming their own people. Proposition's world only matches action to ability, and rich countries handle the heavy costs while poor countries focus on survival and adaptation to these new problems. When we compare outcomes, the proposition's model achieves both fairness and effectiveness, making it clearly much stronger in the capacity clash. Now, the summary of this clash is opposition wants equal effort, but poor countries lack this money and technology to contribute effectively without harming their own citizens. Proposition's model is much more fair and more practical because it matches responsibility to capacity, leading to faster and more sustainable climate action. Proud to propose.
Good morning. I am here to bring out the clash of this motion and explain how opposition can be more impactful if our policies are implemented and how proposition suggestions are simply untrue, unrealistic, impractical, and less impactful. And for the two main clashes, first of all, whose responsibility is it of our greenhouse gases emission? And two, what kind of solution could have a better impact? And for the first one, whose responsibility? The proposition stressed on that the historical debts of the rich countries so that they should pay more. However, this is fundamentally untrue because, as my teammates just mentioned, the poor countries and the current developing countries, they burn a lot of fossil fuels, and that also contributes a lot or even more seriously than the rich countries in the past. However, the rich countries, they already have the ability to use green technology so that for them, they don't need to burn fossil fuels right now, so it's a counterbalance. So of course, and so basically, it's everyone should have contributed equally. And to second my clash, I reject it to have a better impact. So first of all, I don't think proposition has understand our definition of resource complementarity. Of my first and second speakers has both mentioned is that. For example, rich countries, that their wealth, they have got wealth, so they provide money. Countries with technology, they provide technology, while poor countries, they might still have a lot of labor. They can provide labor, and the labor could get paid from the rich countries. And this is a resource complementary by letting the poor countries survive and have the chance to strive while we can solve this problem more clearly. And the proposition only stressed on how the poor countries could not survive, and it is simply untrue. To move on to who has a better impact, it's definitely opposition because, first of all, proposition, their policies is difficult to implement. The rich countries have to invest billions of dollars, which will inevitably sacrifice some crucial parts, financial support, such as more taxes or infrastructure improvements, and harm the economy. And how do you make sure the rich countries will collaborate with the poor countries? When they, in the proposition's definition, they have to provide money, technology, labor, and everything. This is simply unrealistic. You see, Trump already get out of the Paris green solution because that he feels it's unfair. And also, proposition did not consider the climate change is a global issue, so everyone should have their self-interest to act. And also, wealth is only one aspect of contribution. So that the resource complementary means that everyone, I reject that, means that the global optimum means that each countries are contributing what is the best in their country to make sure every category should be done to the optimum choice. And also, there is no point and no good on stressing who polluted more historically. We should stress on how to solve the impact and the problem. The proposition stressed that the rich countries did historically more, which does not make any sense, or it's it's injustice. But however, they're not trying to really solve this problem. While resource complementary make sure that both rich countries and poor countries got to strive, and we can solve this climate crisis more easily and efficiently. And summarize, we get a better impact of really solving the problem by resource complementary carry equal responsibility in different categories, and we can achieve this goal equally, and both rich countries and poor countries will ultimately agree because it brings benefits to both of the sides. It's a win-win, and we can solve it more efficiently. Also, the policy is impossible to implement, as for example, some actions should be taken where it's the most effective. It's not necessarily within the rich country's territory. This means that there will be a lot of conflicts if the rich countries implement their plans on the poor country's territory, and the poor country will think the rich countries are actually intervening their domestic affairs and causes a lot of troubles and conflicts that make this impossible to actually solve. And also, the rich won't cooperate if they can't get any good from this. And it outweighs the responsibility, because it's untrue, and we bring a better impact, and the propositions claimed are impractical and untrue, while we bring a more impactful. Thank you.
As a Kansai final reply speaker, we strongly believe that countries should not do more in climate change than poor countries. Firstly, my opponents did not fully understand what we're saying. We're not saying that poor countries also make more pollution. However, we're saying that they are making the same amount of pollution, since that the poor countries are the ones now that are trying to like manufacture stuff and have factories to save its economy. And so basically this means that poor countries are the one that create more pollution, which makes sense for our argument, telling George like that there's no reason that richer countries should do more than in climate change than poor countries. And also, I want to emphasize the point again. Doing in climate change is a shared responsibility, no matter the history or what. It's just a shared responsibility that the whole world is responsible for. If you're a part of the whole world, you have to be responsible for. So this means that there's, like my opponent said, more morality. But however, this seems like a point for our side, is that no matter what, morally, the countries in the world, no matter how much they pollute, should take part in the climate change, and they should do the equal amount, because that there's no reason for them to do more, since this is better benefiting all the countries on the earth. So basically, based on that, I believe that we win this debate.
Judge, there's some flaws in their case and also with their speeches. First of all, they did not listen to our speeches, which shows that they're just parallel speaking. And we said that 80% of historical emissions and corporate ownership is going to lead to rich responsibility. But then they just said that poor countries pollute now. So that shows that they don't engage with us anyhow. And we also said that there's going to be a proportional like 80-20 split between the poor and the rich countries, but they only answered that everyone contributes equally. So today I found two issues in this debate, which first is effectiveness and also about fairness. Moving on to our first issue, they said that poor countries act now, such as like trees labor manufacturing shift, but then we said that trees absorb 5 to 10% of emissions. Labor, so low-skilled jobs doesn't mean that there's going to be clean tech. The real 80% driver is that the fossil fuel power plants, heavy industry, aviation, shipping, and which is 80% owned, financed, or consumed by rich countries. What's our mechanism here? Our world, in our world, rich countries decarbonize by 2030, like about 80% of global capacity. They fund poor country adaptations such as like flood walls and drought crops and then curve carbon bends. But in their world, poor countries contribute labor but doesn't even invent carbon capture. Rich countries do some because everyone does. Moving on to the second issue against fairness. They said that poor countries pollute now, so it's equal burden. We said that historically, 80% plus current corporate ownership means that it's the richest duty, such as like Apple's Chinese factories. Apple decides, Apple profits, and Apple is responsible. So what's the mechanism here? Our world, there's like an 80-20 split. So poor countries survive first and then contribute 20%, such as like trees and whatnot. Their world says that there's equal effort and poor countries divert survival budgets to climate. What's the result of this? Children starve to plant trees. And because of that, I'm more than proud to propose.